This is lesson 1 in our series, The CAGED System. In this lesson, I'm going to teach you all about major CAGED chords. The charts and diagrams for everything in this lesson are available on our Patreon page. The CAGED system can seem really confusing to people when they're first starting to learn it, but it's actually pretty simple. And really, it's just a way to organize the fretboard in a way that's easy to visualize for you to be able to see chords and scales and arpeggios and connect them up and down the fretboard. And this system is unique to the guitar. It's completely based on the layout of the guitar's fretboard. This doesn't work on the piano or other instruments. So the first thing to realize about the CAGED system is that it's based on the open chords C major, A major, G major, E major, and D major. And as you can probably see, those chords together spell CAGED. Now, besides just being common open chords that you'll play all the time on the guitar, the reason these chords are useful is that they're easy to turn into what are called movable chords, which I'll explain in this lesson. So again, those chords are the open C major, the open A major, the open G major, the open E major, and the open D major. And if you've been playing guitar for any amount of time, you've probably played all of these chords. And open just means that they're in the open position, which is down near the headstock of the guitar. And it usually means that they have open strings in the chords, which all of these chords do, which just means that they're notes that aren't fretted. They're just strings that are left to ring out. So if we start with the open C major chord, again, if you've been playing guitar for any amount of time, you've probably played this chord a lot. We can actually make this chord a movable chord, meaning that we can move it anywhere up and down the fretboard. It'll no longer be a C major chord, which I'll explain as we go through this lesson, but you'll be able to take this shape and play it anywhere up and down the fretboard. So if we take this open C major chord, move all the notes up half a step so that there's no open strings anymore, we would end up with this shape. So this is a C-shape bar chord or a movable chord. All bar chords are movable if they don't have open strings in them. And this is a shape we can play anywhere up and down the fretboard. And like I said, it's no longer a C chord anymore, but it's a C-shape chord. And if that's confusing, don't worry, I'm going to explain all that as we go through this lesson. So like I said, we could move this shape anywhere. I could move it up another half a step, the whole shape. I can move it up again. I can move it up all the way over here, move it up really anywhere that I can comfortably play it on the fretboard. If I play this shape, I'm playing a C-shape bar chord or a C-shape movable chord. Now, like I was saying, when you move that C-shaped chord, it's no longer a C major chord. It's just a C-shaped chord. And what I mean by that is, if you look at the open C major chord, the lowest note, which is on the 5th string, is what's called the root of the note, which is the name of the chord, or the note that the chord is built on. So a C major chord, the root is C. Well, in this shape, that's where the root lands. No matter where I move it, that's the root of the chord. So if I was to move this into the C-shaped bar chord and move it anywhere, I just moved it right here so that my lowest note's on the 5th fret. Well, that note that's on the 5th string is still my root note. And where it is right now is actually a D note. So that means this is a D major chord, but it's in the C shape. You can see it's still the shape of that open C major, but we're playing it as a movable bar chord. But it's no longer a C major chord because the root has changed. And where it's shown on the diagram right now, the lowest note, which is the root note of this shape, is a D. It's a D major chord, but it's a C shape chord. Or I can move it here. Again, this is a C-shaped bar chord, but it's not a C major chord because that lowest note is a D sharp or an E flat, depending on the musical situation. You can call it either one. And that's the name of the chord. So this would be a D sharp or an E flat major chord in the C shape. So like I said, I can move this C shape chord anywhere up and down the fretboard, and whatever the root note is, that's the name of the chord I'm playing. And then we can do the same thing for all the other CAGED chords. So the next chord was A in the CAGED system. Here's your open A major chord, which I'm sure you've played a million times, if you've played guitar for any amount of time. Again, if I move that shape up half a step or more, I'm just moving up half a step to start, so that there's no open strings. Now I have an A shape bar chord. And one thing about this shape, it's very common to play it like it's drawn on the screen right here and like I just played it. But it's also very common to remove the first string just to make it easier to play. Grabbing that high E string, the first string, is actually kind of tough with this chord, and it's not necessary a lot of times. So a lot of times when I play it, I'll play it like this almost all the time unless I specifically need that high note in it. So this is just another version of the A-shaped bar chord, which you'll see me play a lot. So now we can take this A-shaped bar chord and move it anywhere up and down the fretboard. I'm just randomly moving it up the fretboard. And now I'm playing an A-shaped bar chord that's a movable chord, but when I move it, it's no longer an A major chord. Because again, if we go back to the A major open chord, the lowest note in this voicing, and it'll be the same for all the CAGED chords, the lowest note will be the root, is the root. And since in the open position, the lowest note is an A, that means I'm playing an A major chord. But if I move it up to here, for example, the lowest note is still my root, but where it's drawn on the diagram right now is a B. That makes this a B major chord in the A shape. Or if I move it up here, my root note is an E, that's an E major chord in the A shape. Or if I move it all the way up here, that's an F sharp or a G flat major chord in the A shape. So again, I can move that shape anywhere, and whatever the root note is, that's the name of the chord. But it's an A shape chord that I'm playing. Then we can do it with the next chord in the CAGED system, which is G, C, A, G. This is the open G major, which I'm sure you've played a million times if you've been playing guitar. Again, if we move that up half a step or more so that we don't have open strings, we end up with this shape, which is a G-shaped bar chord. And now this is an almost unusable chord, and almost no one plays it because it's really difficult to finger this chord. So the most common by far way to play this chord is to remove the first string, and you end up with this shape. So this is still a G-shaped bar chord. It's just removed the note on the first string to make it easier to play. So now again, I can move this anywhere up and down the fretboard. The shape stays the same. I'm playing a G-shaped bar chord, but when I move it, I'm no longer playing a G major chord. And then again, to know what chord I'm playing when I move it, again, the lowest note in this shape is the root. And since when you're playing the open chord, that's a G note, this is a G major chord. If I was to move it to here, for example, with my lowest note on the 5th fret, in the 5th fret, well, that note's an A, so that means I'm playing an A major chord in the G shape. Or I can move it up here, my lowest note's a D, that's a D major chord in the G shape, and so on. I can move it anywhere up and down the fretboard. As long as I know what the root note is, I know the name of the chord. And then for the next chord in the CAGED system, E, C, A, G, E, That's your open E major chord, which I'm sure you played a million times if you've been playing guitar. Again, move all the notes up, the whole shape up a half a step or more to remove all the open strings to put them on the fretboard. You end up with this shape. So this is an E-shaped bar chord. And again, I can move this shape anywhere up and down the fretboard, and the shape stays the same. It's just the name of the chord changes based on my root note. And again, if we were to look at this, the lowest note in the open E major is the root note. And since in the open position that's an E, that means that's an E major chord. But if I was to play it, for example, half a step up, that lowest note is an F. So that's an F major chord in the E shape. If I played it right here, that lowest note is an A. So that's an A major chord in the E shape. Move it up again, that's a B major chord in the E shape. Again, that's a C sharp or a D flat major chord in the E shape. And then the last chord of the CAGED system, D, C, A, G, E, D. This is your open D major chord, very common chord. If we move that shape up half a step or more to get all the open strings, the one open string in this case, onto the fretboard so that there's no open strings, we end up with this shape. That's a D shape movable chord this time. It's not a bar chord because you're not barring any of the notes, but it is a movable chord because there's no open strings. And again, I can move this shape anywhere up and down the fretboard, and that's a D-shaped movable chord. And again, to know what chord I'm playing, I just need to know the root note. And again, the lowest note in this chord is the root note. In this open position, that lowest note is a D. That makes this a D major. That's why this chord's called a D major. But if I was to play it here, my lowest note is actually a D sharp or an E flat. So this would be a D sharp or an E flat major in the D shape. If I moved it up again, that lowest note is an E, so this would be an E major chord in the D shape. Move it up to here, that would be an A major chord in the D shape. If I moved it again, that'd be a C major chord in the D shape. Again, I can move it anywhere as long as I know what the root note is, I know the name of the chord. So just a quick recap. The CAGED system is built on the open chords C major, A major, G major, E major, and D major. And they all can be turned into movable chords when we move them up at least half a step so that there's no open strings. So this is your C-shaped bar chord. This is your A-shaped bar chord, which this right here without the first string is a really common way to play it, which I play it this way most of the time. This is your G-shaped bar chord. Again, almost no one plays this shape, the full shape, when it's a bar chord. They remove the first string, and this is a really common way to play the G-shaped bar chord. This is your E-shaped bar chord, and this is your D-shaped movable chord. And again, it's not a bar chord because you're not barring any of the notes, but it's still a movable chord. And these chords can be played anywhere up and down the fretboard. That's why they're called movable. And to know the name of the chord, you just need to know your root note. And for all these chords, all these shapes, the lowest note in the shape is the root note. So the C-shaped bar chord, that note that's on the fifth string, which is the lowest note, is the root note. The A-shaped bar chord, the lowest note that's on the fifth string is the root note. The G-shaped bar chord, the lowest note that's on the sixth string is the root note. The E-shaped bar chord, the lowest note that's on the sixth string is the root note. And the D-shaped movable chord, the lowest note that's on the fourth string is the root note. So as long as you know what the note is, wherever you are up and down the fretboard, you know the name of the chord. And really, this is just the first step in understanding the CAGED system. This is just the first lesson in this series, so I'm going to take you step by step through all the important aspects. But if this is the only thing you get from the CAGED system, you've learned a ton. And really, this is the basis for everything the CAGED system is taking these open chords and turning them into movable chords that you can play up and down the fretboard. But like I said, in the next lessons, we're really going to dive into this, and I'm going to show you exactly how all of this works and how all the CAGED system ties together and all that you can do with it. So those are the major CAGED chords. In the next lesson, I'm going to show you how to use what I just showed you in this lesson so that you can play any major chord up and down the fretboard. So thanks for watching, and be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and keep moving forward.